What are the hurdles facing the Mecca agreement? The defence pact between Saudi Arabia, Turkiye and Pakistan comes at a time of heightened tension in the Middle East. So, who stands to gain from the new alliance? And how is it viewed in the region and beyond? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Anna Burns-Francis. It's an alliance that analysts say highlights Saudi Arabia's desire to diversify its defence partnerships. With the Mecca agreement, the kingdom gets support from Turkey, NATO's second largest military, and Pakistan, a nuclear-armed state. The pact was announced at a time of increased tension in the region. Yemen's Saudi-backed governments launched a military operation against the Ansarullah Houthis after a series of attacks. And Iran and the US have yet to reach a final deal to end the more than 5-month-long war. The trilateral agreement raises questions about the effectiveness of the decades-long American military presence in the Gulf. So, does this alliance offer a viable alternative to the security umbrella promised by Washington? And is it likely to worsen regional instability? We'll talk to our guests in a moment, but first, this report from Michael Apple.
3 signatures, 3 handshakes, and 3 nations bound by a new security pact. The leaders of Saudi Arabia, Turkiye and Pakistan announced the agreement at a ceremony in Mecca on Friday. At its core, the pact mirrors NATO's Article 5, the Collective Defence Clause. An attack on one member will be considered an attack on all. A joint statement describes it as a defensive, not offensive pact, one that aims to ensure the collective security of 3 countries, each with different military strengths and capabilities, each dealing with their own security challenges. For one nation in particular, this agreement couldn't have come at a better time. Saudi Arabia sits between 2 of the world's most important maritime corridors, the Strait of Hormuz to the east and the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandab Strait to the west. Both have become increasingly vulnerable to regional conflict. Last month, Yemen's Houthis declared a naval blockade of the kingdom and warned shipping companies not to use its ports. Days later, Riyadh announced a new security coalition with 13 countries, including Turkiye and Pakistan, to protect freedom of navigation through the Bab el-Mandab Strait, the Red Sea, and the Gulf of Aden.
But if you look in terms of dollars...
For decades, the US has bolstered the kingdom's security, the legacy of an alliance dating back to 1945, which guarantees American military might in exchange for Saudi oil.
Actually, the relation between Saudi Arabia and the rest of America, it's an old relation. We are the oldest ally of the rest of America and the Middle East.
Right.
More than 80 years of alliance.
But the US and Israel's war in Iran has altered power dynamics in the Gulf. And the fallout has spread worldwide. Saudi Arabia, Turkiye and Pakistan say the Mecca agreement is the result of long-standing historical ties and shared strategic interests. And it's those interests that are reshaping decades-old alliances and forging new ones at a time of increased instability and uncertainty in the region. Michael Apple, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guests now. Joining us from Riyadh today is Abdulaziz Alghashian, a senior non-resident fellow at the Gulf International Forum. David Roches is a professor at the Thayer Marshall Institute. He joins us from Solomon's Island in the US state of Maryland. And Zayed M. Belbajian is in London today. He's a managing partner at Hardcastle Advisory. Gentlemen, thank you all for your time. Abdulaziz, I'll start with you. What are the challenges of this pact?
Well, firstly, Anna, thank you very much for having me. I mean, it's good to join you and good to join the honourable guests, Dave and Ziad. I think the challenges of this trilateral alliance is understanding it well. And I think in order to really begin to communicate what it is, I think it's important to really explain what it is not. And I think what it isn't is that, or it shouldn't be understood as an anti-Iran or an anti-Israel or even an anti-India kind of alliance. And I think this is something that really needs to be understood. This is what it is, in my opinion, is a far more organic kind of alliance where three middle powers have come together and realized that each of these middle powers have some sort of utility for the other. And therefore, I think communicating this in the midst of this disinformation campaign that has surrounded Saudi Arabia from the outset of the war, the US-Israel-Iran war, since February, is the challenge. Moreover, I think the other challenge is trying to flesh out what this alliance will be, and really what is the threshold of this alliance. But in my opinion, I think this alliance has a great deal of longevity ahead. And I think it is a result of respective bilateral relations now coming together into a trilateral framework. And I think this is what we will see moving forward. We will see the tests ahead. I think in your introductory segment, you've mentioned the Houthis. You've mentioned, of course, the surrounding threats that Saudi Arabia faces. And I think, in my opinion, the naysayers will immediately try to discredit this alliance. But I think it is to go back again to have a full circle of the point I was making. This is an alliance that, for Saudi Arabia, it sees this alliance as something that's very beneficial for its own capacity and defensive capabilities for the long run.
For Saudi Arabia. So, David, what is in it then for Turkey or for Pakistan?
Well, let me start by saying what's in it for the U.S. I mean, this is actually, I think, a good move that will be welcomed by Washington. Getting these countries in alignment was actually a goal of the Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Johnson administration with CENTO. So long as it doesn't metastasize into some sort of malign anti-Israel thing, which I think is a very remote possibility, I think it's positive. So the main thing I think they'll get is that they have robust defense industries, but a more advanced one in the case of Turkey, less advanced, more machine age in the case of Pakistan, and they need markets. In both countries, the capacity exceeds their ability to pay for it, and they can't really maintain national defense industries without a market. Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, is increasingly, since we saw the Canada, Germany, Denmark embargo of weapons, they're concerned about sources of not necessarily advanced, but things like artillery shells, 155 millimeter NATO standard artillery shells. Both Turkey and Pakistan can produce this at scale. And now that they're members of an alliance, I think would be unlikely to embargo Saudi Arabia. So there's money, there's markets, and there's the possibility for advanced training and education. From an American perspective, if our partners have increased capacity, that's burden sharing. And that's been the aim of successive American administrations since really the end of World War II.
So David's just given us a fairly good or comprehensive idea of what the pact may actually entail in real terms when it comes to the economics of it or the trade relationship there. But it's curious, given that these negotiations started a year ago, that we don't have any more detail about what it actually means in terms of defensive action. Do you agree?
Yes, this has been in the offing for many months, and it's interesting to see that the declaration reiterates what we already expected. I think what Dave said vis-a-vis the US is interesting. Pakistan is the second largest recipient of US aid. Saudi Arabia is the largest foreign importer of US military equipment, and Turkey is the second largest army in NATO. So the spectre of the US within this agreement is quite interesting. In terms of detail, it would be very interesting to see that Saudi Arabia under attack from Houthis to the south and Iran-backed Iraqi militia to the north, to what extent this pact will be put into action. There's also the big question of show me the money. How this will be funded long term, I think, is very interesting. And I was lucky enough to speak to both guests earlier today. And the absence of Egypt is very, very interesting. And I would like to see when that will happen, if it will happen, because that for me is the big detail. Not the elephant in the room, but the Egyptian in the room. Where is he?
What difference does it make to you? Help our viewers understand that perspective.
Of course. Egypt is the most significant Arab military force. Every military alignment in the region has always had a focus on Egypt. From a demographic perspective, from a military perspective, the involvement of Egypt is pivotal. Now, in earlier meetings around this pact, Egypt has been involved as recently as the 30-state Bab al-Mandab alliance that was mentioned a few weeks ago. Now, what Egypt has said about this, what its involvement will be longer term, is very interesting. You will have noted the attacks on Egypt's Mediterranean port a week ago. That will have sharpened focus in Cairo as to what it is that's going on, because this diplomatically significant three-way alliance of Turkey, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia offers Egypt something that I would argue the UAE and Israel don't. And I would like to see how that is played out longer term. And Egypt, again, we must say, is a major US military ally as well. So how that pans out is very interesting.
Yeah. Abdulaziz, can we go back a little bit here, talking about who's in and who's out of this agreement and what it means for relationships in the region? Because I'm wondering if we're being a bit cute by saying that while this is a defensive pact, it's not against Iran or against Israel or against India, but those are clearly the adversaries that these nations do have, and some of them overlap and some don't. But to say that there is absolutely no risk that that will be who this pact ultimately ends up targeting is possibly avoiding the actual topic and the point of the pact in the first place.
Well, I mean, to borrow the phrase that Zaid used, the elephant in the room, quite frankly, unfortunately in the region, there are many elephants in the region. This is the problem, is that, of course, the Iranian threat is there, the Israeli threat is there, and most of all, the threat of insecurity from these proxies and from these non-state actors are there. And I think you are right. There is no doubt of trying to avoid this, and this can be seen in the language of this treaty. In other words, what I think the language of the treaty has done is that it has actually given the choice to Iran to make it whether or not it chooses to be a threat or not, chooses to be really this is an anti-Iran bloc or not. It gives them the opportunity to be hostile and to make sure that it is an undoubted hostile actor in the region or not. We know this, but it is basically, here is a diplomatic move, and I think the diplomatic angle and the diplomatic shade within this treaty should be focused on more, because I think the first line of defense, or the first layer of this treaty, is its diplomacy. And basically now we see a diplomatic bloc forming and diplomatic coordination. This is what we have to see. This is what we have to look at. This kind of this treaty, and basically it's up to them. What I think this treaty did is highlighted a line of spoilers in the region and the ones that want regional stability. And I think this is what I think the Saudis have done with its language. Here, the Saudis have actually moved quickly and kind of did not give an opportunity for it to be misinterpreted or disinterpreted. Once it declared the treaty, immediately the statements came out that this is not against anybody, that this is actually against anybody who wants to create any kind of havoc in the region. And therefore, I think, in other words, what this treaty does is that it kind of delegitimizes any kind of actions in the region that Iran usually takes. And I think this is very important. What I don't think is that if Iran was to fire something on Saudi and use its drones, that Turkey and Pakistan will immediately begin to fire or use its aircraft against Iranian targets. And that's not what will happen, and that's not what they are saying will happen. But the diplomacy of this is very important. It is creating and putting them in a diplomatic corner of saying, listen, you could be part of the region, but you need to really support the region, invest in the stability of the region, not in the instability of the region. I think that's hope that makes sense.
Yeah. And Zaid, I saw you nodding along there, and I'm wondering if the fact it's called a defence pact, but actually the thrust of it, given that we're not expecting, I judge from your responses so far across all three of you, we're not actually expecting that this would be troops on the ground in each other's territory. And so then it's called a defence pact, but actually it's going to hopefully be able to work just on deterrence?
Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction you're making. I spoke to
But will it
Riyadh
work?
and to Ankara. It's interesting, as in how this will work from a defensive perspective is important. A defense pact is only worth the paper that it's written on if it actually comes to a nation's defense. I was lucky enough to speak to Riyadh and to Ankara before we spoke, and Abdulaziz echoes exactly what Riyadh told me, which is that this is, in its main sense, a diplomatic accord, lending the weight of three very important countries in a way to checkmate and to corner Iran in a region that has been prey to what Abdulaziz told me previously, not collateral damage, but collateral targeting. And that will be on the mind of Saudi decision makers. And this is by no means a three-way diplomatic effort. I think this is a Saudi diplomatic effort. But I think what has been under-analyzed and understood, I would venture, is the role of Qatar in bringing this together. There is no accident that these three countries, in which Qatar has been doing its utmost to unify politically and to align diplomatically, have come about. And I think Qatar is the unsung hero from bringing this together. And I understand that Qatar tried very hard to impel the importance of this upon Cairo, and that's what's missing. So though it is a Saudi diplomatic initiative and success, it is a diplomatic accord that is meant to work as a deterrent as opposed to a fully fledged military alliance. No Pakistani government, field marshal, prime minister or otherwise, would be able to sanction an attack on another Muslim country without, risking a coup d'etat or regime change in Islamabad. The Pakistani public simply would not accept it. It happened in Afghanistan this year because there were Afghani factions that were acting in a military way, in a nefarious way vis-a-vis Pakistan. But can Pakistan go out and deal with the Houthis or with Iran-backed Iraqi militia? No way. And that would be my feedback on that point. The role of Qatar, and about this being more a diplomatic accord than a military alliance.
David, can we move then to the role of other countries that the influence they will or will not have had here? Because there has been a lot of discussion in this region of late that some countries, there is a sense that the US has failed to contain the regional upheaval, even contributed to it. And it has caused a global energy crisis. And we are seeing political instability in some countries. And I'm wondering if you feel that this was a natural reaction from Saudi to look elsewhere outside of its relationship with the US for what else it could look to for support.
To an extent, yes. I got to tell you, these are great questions with these two experts. I'm dog paddling as fast as I can, trying to keep up. To a certain extent, I think tactically, again, going back to things like, there's a generational shift in the United States where I think it's going to be harder to provide weapons to countries that are not basically Western democracies. We're seeing that a movement to deny support to Israel. We're seeing it also, for countries like Saudi Arabia and even Qatar, certainly Pakistan. So I think that at a tactical level, it makes sense for an arms recipient that is extremely vulnerable. In spite of the Vision 2030 goals, they're going to remain vulnerable to cutoffs of things, to have partners that can provide things in all weathers, what the Pakistanis call an all-weather alliance. The issue of Egypt is really fascinating. Personally, my read on this, and I mean, I'm I'm a graduate of the same U.S. Army War College class as President El-Sisi, but the Egyptians seem concerned about two things. The first one is they want to ensure that the U.S. aid that they get, which is very important, particularly to the army, that is not cut off in any way. And so I think it makes sense for them, since the initial press on this, particularly in the United States, is that this could be an anti-Israel alliance. I think it makes sense for the Egyptians to hold off and see what the long-term American consensus is on this pact before they commit. The second fear they have is that when people are drawing up plans, Egypt is viewed not as a real partner, but just a source of manpower. And they don't want to be somebody else's cannon fodder. So I think that it is quite possible that Egypt will grow. If this pact develops the way that I envision it, I think that it would be natural that Egypt and many of the Gulf countries, to include Qatar, will accede to it. As for whether it actually becomes a NATO-like organization, it's important to know a lot of people misunderstand Article 5. They think it's an automatic tripwire. One Russian soldier enters a country and then immediately planes are in the air. But actually, Article 5 only obliges the countries to consult. And there have been numerous infringements. The Turks floated the idea of invoking Article 5 when they were getting PKK attacks, which were clearly in the Cold War, which were clearly armed by the Soviet Union, and NATO declined to take action. These pacts are all situational.
Yeah.
But in short, I think Washington will view this as an advance in capacity building, and a welcome advance.
How much, though, does it remove America's position or ability to have a say in events in the region and to influence those countries through which it does have an alliance or a presence with?
Well, we saw this on a smaller scale during the Qatar blockade, when Qatar announced that they were hosting a Turkish base, and there were a lot of impassioned articles saying the United States has been replaced. The Turkish base has been there to little or no impact in the broad geostrategic framework. This should, in theory, enhance the capacity of 3 U.S. security partners and 1 U.S. security ally. There's not a problem with that. And the United States' natural state of nature in the Middle East is what it was before the Iranian Revolution, which was minimal, like 1 ship stationed there and occasional port visits and training exercises. The people forget, but our natural default position in the Middle East is about the same as it is in Latin America, if Latin America didn't have a narcotics problem. Very, very small, and run at a distance. Contingency, Bright Star will happen every other year in Egypt. There will be training missions for our partners, but this is not a place. The U.S. Army puts Germany on its recruiting posters. It does not put the Middle East on its recruiting posters. That's viewed as an obligation rather than an opportunity. So if the locals can shoulder more of that obligation, that's viewed as burden sharing in Washington.
Abdulaziz, in the last few moments, I'm hoping I can talk to you about this, because we have seen a lot of the discussion of late, particularly the commentary from Iran, be like, this conflict is a reshaping of the regional order and the protocol in which we see. And I'm wondering how much of this agreement is an attempt by Saudi Arabia to reassert that it is the face of regional stability.
Well, I think, in my opinion, we are in a process of ordering. I don't think an order has been established. I think the situation is still in flux, and I think the region in itself is still, quite frankly, unstable. I think when it comes to the region, I would say right now, especially with the lack of the ceasefire and the Houthis and the militias all over, I think the region in itself is in a super tactical phase, in my opinion. It's just, we're in a constant kind of reaction kind of form. And in my opinion, I think we are trying to create some sort of stability with this trilateral framework. This trilateral framework is to provide some sort of anchoring and some sort of trying to move forward and creating some sort of base where we could create some sort of strategic outlook. It is to create more of a constructive presence towards this goal that we want. And in my opinion, I will say the following. This is not an anti-Iran alliance, because this is an alliance comprised of unlinear states. Iran is far more linear in the region. Israel is far more linear in the region. This alliance is a composition of 3 states that, as Dave mentioned earlier, have strategic relations with the United States, and all also willing to have relations with Iran, but not unconditionally. So therefore, I think, in my opinion, this is a force now of creating Saudi Arabia as the beacon of stability in the region. And I think Saudi Arabia's Saudi 2030 vision explicitly says a lot about the necessity of a stable region. You know, Saudi's just too big to think about its own.
Right.
And therefore, this is also a call from others to say, invest in me, because you are investing in stability in the region as well.
In the region. So can I come to you for one last question? We have about a minute left, so I apologise for asking you to be succinct. But what do you think then is going to be the real test of this 3-way relationship, this 3-way partnership?
Very good. For me, it will be financial. Show me the money. Who's going to pay for this? And the Turks and the Pakistanis are waiting for somebody to make a big financial gesture. And I think that's what the Egyptians were waiting for. And their bread is obviously buttered with the Emiratis. So we'll see how that pans out. And then separately, the real test will be, as Dave and Abdulaziz alluded to, situationality. We wouldn't be discussing this if it weren't for what Israel and Iran have been doing in the previous 2 years. This pact is a result of what's been going on in the region. So as regional circumstances develop, pacts like these will also develop accordingly. This is by no means a final agreement. This is in flux. It's in change. And who knows, maybe next month they'll mention that Jordan and Egypt are joining, or that Turkey's leaving and that Pakistan is going to join Iran.
More to come.
For clarity. Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes,
gentlemen, thank you very much. Zayed M. Belbaji joining us from London, David de Roche from Maryland, and Abdulaziz joining us from Riyadh. Thank you all, gentlemen. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For now, that's it from me, Anna Burns-Francis, and the team here. Al Jazeera's coverage continues in a moment. Stay tuned.